And joining us now, Senior Advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Mark Regev. Ambassador Regev, we appreciate your time this morning. I want to start with what we heard from the Prime Minister yesterday and also what he wrote in the Wall Street Journal editorial pages, making clear that the offensive isn't, in his words, isn't close to finish. And then in laying out his prerequisites for peace, they included destroying Hamas, demilitarizing and deradicalizing Gaza. How close are you to attaining these three goals at this point in time?
We're not there yet, but every day we are getting closer. In the northern Gaza Strip, where our campaign started earlier, we're seeing the Hamas military machine crack. We're seeing more and more Hamas terrorists voluntarily surrender to the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. We're seeing Israeli control over the ground there. And I think it's only a matter of time before we have victory there in the north. In the south, we started later, as you know, only in November. That'll take a touch longer, but we will see victory there too. And it must be understood that destroying Hamas is a prerequisite for a better future, both for Israelis and Palestinians. You won't have a demilitarized and de-radicalized Gaza without first destroying Hamas. You can't have reconstruction in Gaza, rebuilding the lives of people, without first getting rid of Hamas.
I think the primary question I've heard from some officials in reading the opinion piece was the third prerequisite of de-radicalizing Gaza. What is your threshold for that? How do you have metrics for that? How do you ever achieve that, particularly in the wake of an offensive campaign that has led to the deaths of what the health ministry, Hamas health ministry, says is more than 20,000?
So we think it can be done, and we think that the fact that Hamas has brought this terrible war upon us all, has brought about all this destruction and death, that will create an atmosphere for Hamas's path of radicalism, of extremism, of fanaticism, that will be discredited in the eyes of many Gazans. And just after victories in the Second World War in places like Japan and Nazi Germany led to de-radicalization, and those two countries are now healthy democracies, we believe something similar can happen in Gaza. And I'd remind you that there have been countries in the Middle East, in the Gulf, countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like the Emirates, where in the past you had a more radical tradition. You know, there were even connections between Saudi Arabia and Al-Qaeda in the past and so forth. Those countries themselves have gone through a process of de-radicalization. And today they are moderate countries, open-looking countries, countries that want to embrace the modern world. And I think the Gazans can learn from the experience of their Arab brothers and sisters.
Those are nations that I think also, if you were speaking to them privately, would say they have no issues with Hamas being dismantled and removed from Gaza. And yet, where are they right now? We don't see them making public statements in support of Israel. We see them calling and condemning some of the actions that have been taken. Where are those nations now?
So I think everything depends on us winning this war, and we will win this war. But once Hamas is defeated, many things that today seem impossible will become very possible. Once Hamas is defeated and the world will be discussing building something new in Gaza, I'm sure there will be many partners in the Arab world as well. And ultimately, I mean, it's obvious that getting rid of Hamas is good for the people of Israel. Hamas is a brutal and horrific enemy that has committed the most terrible violence against innocent civilians. But people forget that Hamas has also been a curse for the people of Gaza. They've been ruling Gaza for 16 years. And what have they brought the people of Gaza besides poverty, hardship, and misery? The people of Gaza also deserve a government that actually cares about them.
Ron Dermer, a close advisor and confidant to the Prime Minister, is scheduled to be in D.C. today, meeting with White House officials. At the time, the White House officials are asking for the scale and the intensity to be ratcheted down, which seems to be different from the message from the Prime Minister. What are those conversations expected to yield?
So we've been having really good conversations with the administration since this crisis erupted on October 7th. A close friend of mine said he's never seen the level of dialogue with the United States as close, as intensive as it is to now. And as you've heard repeatedly, we in the United States share common goals. Israel has the right and the obligation to defend itself against this Hamas terror threat. Israel and the United States want to see Hamas destroyed. We want to see a new reality in the Gaza Strip. We can have different discussions on this tactical issue or that tactical issue. We listen very attentively to whatever Washington says, and I believe they listen very carefully to whatever we say to them. But ultimately, we're on the same side of this. We want to see Hamas destroyed.
Before I let you go, Ambassador, the Iranian officials have alleged that Israel was behind a strike that took out an IRGC leader in Syria. They have also vowed retaliation. One, is there truth to the fact that Israeli forces were behind it? And two, are you prepared for whatever retaliation may come that's being pledged not just by Iran, but by their proxies?
So it's clear that Iran is a major problem here. Iran not only is present in Syria, but they're present in Lebanon through their proxy Hezbollah. They're present in Gaza through their proxy Hamas. They pay for some 93% of Hamas's military machine. And of course, we've seen them present in the Red Sea, interrupting international shipping, piracy on the high seas, paid for by Iran and sponsored by Iran through its proxy, the Houthis. The Houthis couldn't do anything without their Iranian logistics support. So Iran is everyone's problem. It's Israel's problem. It's America's problem. It's the problem of everyone who wants to see peace and prosperity here in the Middle East.
But specifically, were Israeli forces behind the strike that took out this IRGC official?
I cannot comment on that specifically. I can say generally, anyone involved in terrorist attacks against Israelis, they can expect that we will find them.
Mark Regev, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.